Good morning, good evening, good night, NBN, Entrepreneurship and Leadership.
Personally, I'm fascinated by the story.
Trust is an underrated weapon in the business landscape.
I'm a really, really strong believer in learning by doing.
What's the definition of success?
You're trying to come up with an answer to the question. But go ahead, Richard.
You could be right, but you're wrong.
Good morning, good evening, good night, Entrepreneurship and Leadership channel listeners on the New Books Network. I'm here with my business partner and friend Kimon and our special guest, Rudradeb Mitra, whose name I've just mangled, and many apologies. I first met you, it must have been 6 or 8 years ago in Warsaw before a CAM Entrepreneurs event, but since then you've been doing many different things. And would you like to just introduce yourself the way you like to introduce yourself now if you meet someone for the first time, either at a social engagement or a business networking meeting?
Well, interesting question. So I actually always avoid talking about my work-related things or what I do as an entrepreneur, as a business. So if I have to introduce myself, I always say that, I kind of either doing nothing or I'm just kind of exploring what's out there, doing things living life peacefully. So this is how I normally would introduce myself in any event or when I meet people.
which isn't very helpful for our listeners.
Well, I believe that leads to a much nicer, interesting conversation, because then you talk about more meaningful, at least in my mind, more meaningful and deeper things, like, how can you do nothing, or what does you mean by sleeping peacefully? Because I think that's kind of things that we all actually at the end in our life look for at the end. So that's, I think, is
well. I mean, now you've piqued my interest. So I say we go this route now, because why don't you tell us? So that's interesting. So can you tell us what does it mean? So how do you sleep more? Why do you sleep more peacefully? And do you need to work to sleep more peacefully? Can you just?
Yeah. So I actually, thanks for asking this question. I actually wrote about it also that, I compared the Eastern philosophy with the Western philosophy. So one is kind of typically the Western mindset is very driven by goal oriented. Like we set some goals, we try to achieve those goals, and we consider that when we achieve those goals that we'll be successful. That's a typical way of kind of setting the goals. The problem with this kind of mindset is that often, to achieve those goals, we are stressed because we're trying to control as much as possible. And the more we try to control something, and we know that we cannot really control everything, so we kind of get more and more stressed. So it affects our sleep and things like that. And I recently was reading someone posted that, I'm working really hard. I haven't slept for last months, and he's very proud about it. And I was like, that's not something I'm proud about.
Yes.
So that's very goal driven, focused, that's one way of looking at it. Let's say I call it more Western mindset, but of course now Eastern cultures or people have also moved to be that kind of mindset. The other side of the mindset is what we typically call Eastern philosophy, which is you're not trying to control too much. You're just you have a vision of your life. You say, okay, this is the direction I want my life to go towards. Well, I guess, okay, I enjoy, for example, education. I love being the best of myself. I like being involved in things that inspire me, helping others. Let's say we kind of define the overall vision of the life, but we don't set really concrete goals year by year or month by month. So it keeps our mind more open, and every day we try to do interesting things, do the best what we could do without being kind of bogged down to a fixed mindset goal. And if we can't achieve those goals, then we get stressed out. So to me, sleeping peacefully is actually a very important criteria, which is what makes us truly, say, peaceful. One thing, I don't think just lying on a beach and having enough money lying on a beach makes us peaceful either, because that's a waste of our time. So one thing, we want to be productive. We want to be the best of ourselves. So that's important, but at the same time, it's not important, but it's also important that not to be too bogged down to a fixed set of goals, because that brings stress to us. The more
it's like a burden as well, right? I mean, they become weights in your life as well. Because I absolutely totally agree with generally with sleeping peacefully. I'm a big fan of sleeping peacefully, and I think everybody should achieve that. But I'm also a fan of Eastern philosophy. And I do hear, and it is very interesting to hear the way you describe it. That we in the Western world, we tend to create more of a structure, a fixed structure, and that in and of itself creates stress, because the structures and the goals, or whatever, the steps or whatever you want to call them, like people get stressed when they work in a job and they haven't moved up a level or something like that, right? That's isn't that like a stupid game that somebody created? I mean, this is like there's no, it doesn't really make sense, but that's interesting. So but what did you like? Can you just tell us about yourself a little bit? I mean, did you,
Yeah.
where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Yeah, so I actually was born in India and kind of did school in India, but I left India almost like 19 years ago, actually now. And my first part of my life, I call it, worked as an AI researcher, published some research papers. I did my master's in Cambridge, and then I had built a few startups. That was more like, I would say, kind of more towards a Western mindset, still having fixed goals and trying to succeed. And this is also, I've seen evolving as me as a person, that when I'm kind of insecure, I'm more trying to control, because I'm trying to prove that I'm kind of, somehow I could do things in my life. So that was the first, let's say, a part of my life. And then there was this 2017, 18, 19, I think that's the time when I started I left the company that made, revenue was quite good, I think $7 million. And I just didn't feel that making money actually was something that was important to me. And I started being at the point of being exploring. That's when I also met Richard. I was luckily invited to different conferences. I had the opportunity to go and travel in different countries, became a mentor. So through that opportunity, I tried to meet a lot of people. And that's the time when I also started reading more, writing more. And that led to opening Omdena. I was never thinking about opening another startup, because I was kind of tired of the whole startup ecosystem. But I kind of came up with this, another way of hopefully building a startup. And so I will say that I could divide my life into these kind of different phases. AI researcher.
So were you originally, when you I guess you did your master's degree in Cambridge or something like that. Yeah. And then would you I just want to stick a little bit to this philosophy. Would you have classified yourself as actually going the other way, like actually going to a Western style of, like, you actually were there, you were living the Western, like you were actually living the Western style of life, basically, of trying to achieve, and then okay, that's very interesting. And then that's when you rejected, and then I guess at some point you rejected that, and you moved you changed your life philosophy. And then would you just give us a couple minutes just to understand what was this business that you set up, and what did it do, and did you sell it, or what actually happened with that business?
You mean the part of so I built 6 startups actually at that time.
Okay. Oh, maybe tell us just a little bit, just to get us flavor for what you were doing, because that, this is an entrepreneur podcast, so it's like to hear what were you setting up, and what did you do with these? Like, I find it fascinating. I founded 2 businesses in my whole life, and I'm like, this is like a long life now. I'm in my 50s, and I always am fascinated by people who found, and you're young, and you founded multiple, and you quit them like a long time ago. So like, what happened? Did they stop? Did they, maybe just a couple words, basically?
Basically, you could build so many startups because most of them failed. Simple as that.
Okay.
I mean, if you succeed, then you don't end up so fast, right?
Okay, maybe the ones that worked, then, or the one that worked.
So the short answer is 4 of them failed by some way. I mean, I would say, of course, define failure, but I don't want to go into philosophical definition of failure now. Financially failed, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it was easy. The first startup was started in Cambridge, within a year or 1.5 years, couldn't make money.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, but the one that made the most money was actually a platform, something similar to what I'm building in Omdena actually, but more for a platform for developing mobile and web apps. At 2014-15, there was a big need of development of mobiles, and what we realized that there are developers around the world, like as we know, global platform, so where developers can come and build those apps, mostly for startups, or mostly startups, like well-funded startups based in the US. So connecting well-vetted developers or companies with mostly startups in the US, let's say. Mostly that's the business model was. And as you can imagine that, it's typical like a TopTel kind of platform. It's kind of easy to scale, enough good developers, whom you can connect with businesses, and that's the basic business was. At certain point, what happened that there was 2 other co-founders, there were founders of those, and I just said that I don't want to be, I just felt like this is not what I want to do. going further on, I just left the company. I was not interested too much of anything else, so I just left it. And I think that was one of the best decisions, because when you leave something and you don't have necessarily a lot of money, that also kind of keeps the mind active, right? You kind of think, okay, what I need to do something. When I had money to kind of survive for the next 5-7 years, I mean, it's not about that, but it's just kind of, you still kind of not become a lazy. You still have this kind of desire to do something, but you don't know what exactly want to do. So that gives you this couple of years of space that gave me time to just kind of be free and explore what's out there.
And which ultimately led you to the Eastern philosophy, I guess, and this different, or this a different approach to.
Yeah,
well, I guess which yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in India. So somehow, there was something. The Eastern way of living life was still anyway there. It's not like so prominently in my mind. But I think what happened that during that time, of course, because I started reading more, and I got more connected with my roots, and which I kind of often talk about, that being connected back to your roots, understanding who you are, finding your identity. So I think that was a phase which really helped me to connect to my roots and understanding myself, who am I, and my identity.
That's interesting. I can keep going, Richard, but I feel like this is between me and Rudradeb at the moment.
No, I was going to make a comment about self-awareness, that if you sort of stop, and you mentioned the guy posting about how they hadn't been sleeping and working nonstop for weeks or months, I don't remember, and they were kind of proud, but that suggests to me that he was trying to impress other people. He was like showing off, and I think quite often a lot of people live to impress other people. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's their partner, and sometimes it's society at large. But ultimately, you need to, if not impress yourself, be happy with yourself. So it's quite a lot of stepping away from the judgment of other people, isn't it? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all comes down to the same thing, that how you are. How many insecurities I have. I always say that the more we try to control something, the more control others people liking us, or control what others think about, is how insecure you are. It's basically a direct relation between that. The more we become secure and less insecure we are, the more we don't care. So it's just simply as that.
Okay, so the reason I asked that was to ask a bit about your family background. That obviously you said you grew up in India, and very often with entrepreneurs, there's something in their background. Either they're rejecting their background or they're following in their family footsteps. And would your parents have been? They must have been proud of you going to study in prestigious, famous universities. But were they happy with you being an entrepreneur? Did you realize you're going to be an entrepreneur? Was it a surprise for them? And then, if they were proud, were they disappointed when you quit? And if they weren't proud, were they continued? How did you relate what you did in your life to your background and your family upbringing?
Well, actually, no one in my family, I mean, I'm talking about extended family of like 200 people, have ever been a businessman, right? Like Indian extended family. My parents come from a very traditional family. My father was a government officer. My mother was a housewife. So when I kind of finished my Cambridge, I still remember that I started a company. My father was disappointed. He said he couldn't sleep at night. He's a bit stressed. What's happening with my life? So no, it's none of the family background that kind of helped. What actually perhaps helped me, I often tell this story also, that was being in Cambridge and being in the ecosystem helped me a lot. Like, I still remember one experience I had. I met Twitter co-founder. I don't know which one, but I remember one of them. And, when I spoke to him for 15 minutes, I felt like, this guy doesn't seem to be any smarter than me. Just like he got the opportunities, he was in the right place at the right time, so he could build the Twitter. So that kind of helped me to say, okay, if he could do something, maybe I can also do that, because that helps a lot to kind of. Because often before that, I used to think of people who, like, for example, Mark Zuckerberg, I think people are super smart and that's why they could build a company. But that's not actually the reality is. So I think that experience in Cambridge helped me a lot to start being into the entrepreneurship journey. I don't think the family background really helped that much.
So you said your father couldn't sleep at night when you tried to start a business, and presumably he might have hoped you would get a prestigious job, an engineering job, or work for Google or something like that. So that was, and then when you stopped doing your successful startup and said you're just going to chill out, did the disappointment did he cause you? He stopped sleeping again?
Yeah, I mean, at that time, I mean that I remember because he wrote an email about that he's worried and couldn't sleep. But the next part, he didn't write an email, but I remember he was concerned that I may not have any money. So he said, okay, do I need to send you some money because you're not earning anything? So that was the point. I mean, like you can understand that coming from India or mostly such kind of societies, job securities are something we always look for, right? So that's again a kind of control. We want to control our life as much as possible.
Right.
So not having a job is like stressful. Like, oh, what will you do if you don't have money in 5 years or something, right? So
right.
Point.
Okay. So it was really, you weren't like one of these textbook entrepreneurs who was like selling lemonade at the age of 8 and sort of plotting your business career when you were young. That wasn't there. So you've mentioned a couple of times what you're doing now, but because of your enigmatic way of introducing yourself, our listeners don't yet know. So could you describe the AI thing you're doing? I know you wrote a book about AI, but this is beyond the book. This is after the book. So perhaps you can talk about what your current project is.
Absolutely. And I will tell you why I started this also, that kind of fits into this whole story. So during this journey of the point when I said that I could take a break and I had the opportunity to travel in different places of the world, what I saw that because access to knowledge became very democratized over the last 5-7 years, there's a ton of people out there, they have the right motivation, the right skills, the right knowledge, right? People living in Africa or even people who we saw in their 40s and 50s who want to switch their career, they can easily go and gain the knowledge, like say AI and machine learning, but they don't have access to opportunities. Unfortunately, and this is something, Kimon, we were talking before, that hiring is still somehow biased towards younger people who are freshly graduated and also male, to be very honest. So typically, whenever a company is trying to hire, they look for certain kind of profile. Look at the CV. Look at these looks 3 years of experience. This did from this university, so they are still biased. But that's not required anymore because there's so many people out there that have the right skills. But it's difficult to find them, to be very honest. So I started this company when I got motivated by saying, okay, how can I create a platform where people from all over the world that come together, they can collaborate, they can learn from each other and develop their careers and show to the world like what kind of skills they have built, what kind of knowledge they have done, right? This is very important. So that kind of idea what drove me build Omdena. The other side of what I also saw, specifically in the AI field, is that there's a lot of talk around AI for good. There's a lot of companies so-called say, oh, we are doing this in AI for good, mostly corporations, but they're not really serious about building something for social good. They were just kind of used it as a CSR. And they're 90% of the business and 95% of AI, what they build is pure business process optimizations. So I was driven by, can I create a platform which provides opportunities for people from all over the world to come together, learn, share, develop their careers, build solutions that are meaningful for the world, while at the same time for organizations, mostly NGOs, but also impact startups, to build solutions that are more meaningful, that has more social impact and kind of those kind of environments. So that's what drove me to build Omdena. So in short, I would say Omdena is a platform where collaborative people from all over the world, they develop their careers to the point to getting jobs and starting earning money through the project, and for organizations to come and build interesting, impactful solutions.
Great. And if you could just take us back, maybe in terms of numbers, where you are right now, and then we'll come back to how you got it up and running, because you had the idea, and I think the why is always important. So where are you right now in terms of numbers of users or revenue or whatever you want to share?
So we started three and a half years ago. Until now, we have run over 320 projects with organizations. I think around 120 organizations or startups have worked with us. They come from 65 countries. Over 10,000 people have been part of at least one project, and they are from around 105 to 110 countries. In terms of, we also have this idea of local chapters. So we have different chapters around the world who can open a chapter of Omdena and run projects. And we have chapters in, I think now 55 to 57 countries across the world, around 100. I mean 110. I mean, every month, there are 10 to 15 new chapters join. So it's just weird, but it's just the range. Around 50 to 50, 60 countries we have chapters. And yeah, that's the current state we are in. Every month, around 2,000 to 2,000 people normally apply to join Omdena project, at least. So that's an application we get. And we start every month around 20 to 25 new projects.
Help me understand just practically, how does it work? So there's you have this base of people who are data scientists, I guess. They're people that want to work on AI projects, and then how does it, and obviously chapters and stuff like that, I guess, are a way for managing it in a more local way. But how does it just organizationally, how does it work? Where do the projects come from, and then how do they get distributed, and who sets them up? I mean, projects, it's like, or I guess, is it locally, or are the teams distributed, or it depends on the size of the project? Just a little bit, because it's very interesting. It seems massive, to be honest with you. Or maybe it's just lots of small projects. It's hard for me to even grasp it.
So there are the three kinds of projects that we start, right, in Omdena. So let me talk about the core, which we call an 8 weeks challenge, where it's always with an organization or a startup who provide us a project that they would like to build, a social impact project. I will give an example so that people can understand. Let's say we work with UNICEF, and UNICEF came to us and said, hey, we would like to identify school locations in South Sudan. And we want to use satellite images to identify school locations in South Sudan. That is their project they had. And then we host a project. Typically, we get, say, 400, 300 applications for that given project. Then we select 60 to 80 people from that application pool. And then these 60 to 80 people then work together for 8 weeks. It's a collaborative environment. So we have our internal processes, the tools and management that we have created, so that these people collaborate over 8 weeks to build the solution.
Yeah, but that's a big, you're talking about, whatever, your IP or whatever. That's a big thing that you made it sound really easy, but that's like the big piece. What's the tool? What's the platform that they work in? How do they collaborate? Who's the project manager? How does this project broken up into? Okay, anyway, that all is your whatever. That's your secret sauce, and then they get plugged into this, and then what? And then
the output is then given to the UNICEF, and then they start using it. So in fact, if you go to Google and search Giga is this project, UNICEF, Giga and Omdena, you can see. We work with lots of these kind of organizations, like Hot OS. We just finished a project with the Hot OSM, which is a humanitarian OpenStreetMap. The solution that we build, the model they are going to apply in the real world. So these are real world projects. So these are not proof of concept kind of models. So that's one kind of project. The other kind of projects are run by local chapters themselves, which are also mostly with a partner organization. So what we really focus in is that you need to go and find a partner, or we help you find a partner. They provide you the project, and you build a solution for that project. The local chapters are actually more open source, because they're the idea of education. More people come together, learn, develop, share. The previous one, the 8 weeks core, are not open source. These are projects that are built for a particular organization that kind of going to use it. So these are the kind of projects that we run. And then there's a third kind of project that we call top talent programs, which is basically the people that perform really well in these other projects that I said. They get paid work, because the first two are more like you develop your skill, learn from each other, sharing and knowledge. But once you perform well, then the top talent programs provides you projects also with real world, with companies that want to build a solution, where they also get paid. And that's another kind of project we run. So these are the two.
Okay, so in that case, Omdena is charging the client.
Yes, of course.
In the first two cases, it's just it's pro bono or
yeah. So you can look at the pyramid. The lowest level is local chapters. There is no fee. Exactly. It's all open source and things. The 8 week score challenges, we ask a small fee, which depends on 5 to 7. It's an operational fee, very small amount of money, which is a great value for this organizations, because normally the same thing would cost them, let's say $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and and build something at a very fractional amount of time. And then the top talent is where we also charge money, and the collaborators get money. So what we create is kind of pyramid structure, so that both the collaborators can start their journey from Omdena local chapter, or we have something called Omdena School, which is also giving courses for free also.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so Omdena School is also something, there's also where the collaborators, actually what we have seen, that they want to build their courses. So they provide the courses for free, and then other people can actually gain those experience and knowledge through doing those courses. So at the bottom of the pyramid, we have Omdena School and local chapters. This is more educational driven, learn by doing things. Then you perform well, you are invited to join the Omdena Code Challenges. then you then get some more additional benefits. So we have some paid courses, they get access to some premium courses and things like that, certain benefit structure. And then if you again perform well, then you move to the top talent where you start earning money.
Okay, this is really interesting. So it's basically helping somebody if you're self motivated and you want to help yourself out, you can just follow the route and get the skills. Now, what I'm thinking all the time is you must have some automated way of or what's your way maybe of measuring and assessing, because you have lots of people and you have to measure and assess these people, and how do you get to the top? Obviously they're being measured and assessed on some scales somehow, or what's can you talk at all about how that works? I'm just kind of curious. How does
we have built some internal tools for that actually. So we look at, for example, the GitHub repository, what lines of code they're checking in. We also look at their Slack conversation. Like, we use kind of every project is hosted in a Slack, right? So we see how what Slack conversation what kind of conversation they're doing. And then we have this referral system, like internal referral system, that during the project, the cross referral, that if someone you are doing, so someone can refer to you, kind of we can see that, how well you are doing within the project. So this is all kind of, there's a number attached to every week. We actually track the progress of every single collaborator. So we give them some kind of, let's say, a score between 0 to, I think, 5. And so we kind of track that way.
Is it automated, or is it fully automated? Or when you say you look at the code, is that?
It's all automated. Yeah,
it's all automated. Okay, that's pretty cool.
By the way, Rudradeb, this is a podcast, so when you're nodding, like a couple of times you nodded, and I realized that the listeners wouldn't know you just said yes. So,
okay. Yeah, just so yeah, it is actually all automated.
Yeah, and I think when you were getting it started, was there like quite often at the start of a project, there's this moment where you have a feel, yes, this is going to work, or maybe this isn't going to work. And when was the first moment you felt, wow, I've actually uncovered something that is really going to work? Were there some sort of milestones or special days or emails or events that made you think, I'm onto something, this was a good idea?
Yes. So that actually, I think when I started, I was not really sure if it would end up being a business, or even the idea of making people collaborate, build something is kind of quite crazy. What really I realized right in the first few months was the kind of people that we were getting in who were applying to join these projects. And I was super surprised at that, the quality of people. Like, of course, quality when I mean that on paper, their CV may not look that well. But when I read their applications, their personal history, and then when I saw how they were performing in the first few projects, I remember I actually wrote an article at that time that we built a model to identify rooftops and solar installations. And the work that we did in 2 months was, to me, surprising. Like, even companies for 6 months, 2 people full time cannot do those kind of things. And so I was surprised in the very first few months to see the kind of work we are able to do, first of all, but also the kind of people who are interested to join this. And then I really realized that there's so many, I call hidden gems, so many people around the world who are extremely talented. Mostly like 40% of Omdena collaborators are females. The median age of Omdena collaborators are 35, 40. What happening is that, first of all, females, as you guys know, that, it's not always easy for them to move to, tech sector. But what we also saw that a lot of people are switching their careers in their 30s and 40s. And for them, it's very difficult to find opportunities to gain experience. And they are also very good. So we actually started in writing growth stories. In our website, if you go, there's a blog page and there are growth stories. We highlight the people that their journey, how they are developed within 6 months, 8 months, their career, starting from nowhere to getting jobs in Microsoft and Google kind of things. So this is where I realized, wow, that's something very interesting, that there's a ton of people out there that would benefit from what we are building.
Okay, so the first early sign was attracting you surpassed your own expectations of the talent. By the way, from time to time you've referenced articles and blog posts. We will ask you to send us a list of those articles and blog posts so that our listeners can dive into the show notes, because I can imagine someone listening thinking, oh, what are these articles Rudra referring to? So we will do that to our listeners. So that is really, so and in today's world that attracting a group of talented people that's a kind of asset. If you think of it in natural resources terms, it's like finding a field with good resources of gold or copper or something like that, I suppose. But in terms of the way you built this through community, can you talk about this? Because I'm in prior conversations, you said that this is an aspect of you didn't want to raise venture capital, you didn't need outside money because of the way you leverage community. Can you describe what you did and why you did it and what lessons or why you think it's important and a good way to go?
Well, my thoughts about the way the current VC environment is, venture capital environment, is that they all focus at maximizing the profits, which I understand, the returns of profits. They are not too much focused whether there's a long-term, good for the world or even for the company. All they're looking is, okay, how can we grow the company? We pump money into the company, we make a rapid growth, and then we can exit. That's the typical model. Now, that definitely many times are not good for the world. That creates a superficial growth. Like when you pump money, it creates a superficial growth, but then you're always loss making. As we got, both of you know, so many such companies have been like that. So this model of growth, I don't agree to that. And of course, that adds to stress of the founders and everyone, right? So this is one model of growth that is actually most people try to follow. The other model of growth, and this evolved while building Omdena, this is not something I had in the mind before when I started the company, is where we are doing something that people genuinely love. And Paul Graham once said that, and I can see that in Omdena also, that it's better to have 100 people who love your product than 1 million people who kind of like your product. So that's what we saw in Omdena. That if you follow LinkedIn, and we have over 30,000 followers in LinkedIn, and everything is organic. Like people write about Omdena, that they shared, this is what I did, this is I learned, I learned this project, you could go and do this. So we had this group of people that love what we have built. And then you don't spend any money to grow, because they are the ones who are going to talk about you. But then you also know when people talk about you that you are genuinely creating something meaningful, that you're creating something that is worth creating, because you're not faking the growth here. And then that kind of growth is sustainable, first of all, doesn't require a lot of money, or it requires much money to be pumped into to create the growth. But also I think that's genuinely good for the world, because I don't think people will talk about things, at least in today's world when people are becoming more and more conscious, they will talk about things that they don't normally like, or they don't think it's good for them or for the world. So the other side is engage the community, build something that they love, and then they will talk about it, and it will organically grow. And that growth can be quite fast. Like I said, the Omdena numbers do say that you can grow across the world globally, and we have worked with organizations in 65 countries. That's quite big growth, but without pumping any money into the growth, let's say. Mm-hmm. So that's what my whole point is. To show an alternative model, because what I see in the startup ecosystem, and I start going to the startup events and things like that, is that it's a lot around pitch decks, present to the investors, raise money, grow. And that growth is, again, like 3 years, 5 years, exit. How would you exit? But my point is, if you really build something meaningful, you love what you do, why would you even want to exit? This is something happened this year, that someone in Omdena asked me, do I see myself being in Omdena 5 years or 10 years? And I didn't know the answer, because I don't think that long term. But when I really thought through, and I said, yeah, why not? Because I don't see anything else. What would I do? And then I wrote this vision that I think where I would like Omdena to build in this 10 years time. And so I think that when we build something really that we love, engage in community, I don't need to exit in the next 3 or 5 years with a quick growth. I'm okay.
That's an interesting question. So is Omdena like a nonprofit? Is it a corporation? What is it actually? Is it a privately held company?
Yeah, it's not a nonprofit. It is a for-profit startup. I call it for-profit impact startup, but impact startup is not a category of legal category. It's a C corp, let's say. Not a B corp, but of course the focus is like not maximizing profits. So this is, I always say, the focus is maximizing value to the community and the people.
Right. And so can you share a little bit, because you sort of hinted at, it sounds like you wrote a big sort of 10-year or a futuristic. But where do you want to take them then? Where is it going to go? Like, what's it going to be, and where's it going to go?
I'll answer this question. The way I always am amazed when I meet people who are in Omdena and the way they see Omdena. Like, I was in Saudi Arabia, and the chapter lead of Saudi Arabia is a professor in university. She told me she's so glad to be part of this world-renowned organization. And I was like, which one? And
Which one?
and then another person who told me that, oh, he's from Africa, that Omdena is like the UN. It's like the UN of AI. And these things makes me, I learn most listening to the people. And then I thought, okay, what are we actually building here? Is it we are building a platform for AI development, or are we building something much more bigger than that? And my point was, can I build the world's biggest impact platform?
The biggest platform? I didn't hear it.
The world's biggest impact platform.
Impact platform, okay.
Yeah, what does that mean also? What is an impact, right? Like we have to measure impact. But I'm saying, can I, through this platform, over 1 million people can get educated? And not just educated theoretically to online courses, but actually practical experiences, building solutions, and finally getting jobs. Like that's the path.
Yes.
Can I do that in the next 10 years, over 1 million people? And can I affect, through the solutions that we are building, affect lives of over 1 billion people positively? Now, we are working with you, and we work with Save the Children. Now, the tools that we are building, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, UNICEF, they are going to launch, already reaching out to hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, right? So we can build through AI solutions that can actually affect positively lives of so many people. So this is what I came up with. And the other way I always see that, to me, am I building the world's biggest, I call it university. I think universities should be a place where people come learn from each other, building solutions, real world solutions, and also get jobs. So in a way, can I build the world's biggest impact platform, which is also, let's say, the biggest university of the world?
Big goals. And I completely get the way you can automate the processes of training and maybe not get project management, but I'm taking it that you've got that sorted, an assessment and who's good and who's bad and so on, or bad needs to improve to be rated among the best. In terms of dealing with these organizations, that sounds a little harder to automate and like a bit more like enterprise sales, that if you have UNICEF calling you or sending you an email, have you managed to automate the process of onboarding, if you let's call them clients or project requesters? Because, in my experience, those big organizations quite often have very inefficient ways of being told to it. So for enterprise sales and, guys in suits and good looking young people have to go and fly and see them and talk to them and stuff like that. So how do you deal with that side of it? Because that sounds quite labor intensive, talking to those project originators. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so my experience is we don't work with corporations, but NGOs. Yeah, we do work with big NGOs. So for example, we are part of this group, which is $500 million funded by USAID, and we are building solutions across the world. Now, what I have seen that NGOs are very interesting. Like, first of all, what we are building in Omdena, the first year of Omdena, we did everything for free. We couldn't charge money from it. We built interesting solutions. And then we went to these NGOs and showed, these are the things that we have built. They got then very interested in the way we are building this community engagement, building AI solutions. So, and then there was a word of mouth. People started talking about Omdena actually to each other. So we didn't really have to go and sell a lot actually with these NGOs. We never bet any of those our clients till now actually. and it's what I have seen that in the NGO space, it's there are very few startups, and this is something I also observed that who are actually selling solutions to NGOs, or they are mostly selling to other startups or big corporations, because it's very difficult to bridge that gap to reach an NGO. But once you start working with few of those, like we are working with Catholic Relief Services for over a year, have worked with UNICEF, UN, Save the Children, then you build the trust, and then others want to work with you also, kind of same things. So once you have these few references, then it's not that difficult actually. So that's
not so much in terms of sales, but like project management, that have you managed, because it seems to me that whether they're a client you've sold to, but once a project starts, do you need a human being to like report back to the people for whom you're building a solution? If you've got 500 organizations running projects, that might mean you need 200 people or 100 people or something like that to report back. So how do you deal with that interaction with the project originator?
So at any given point, there is a head of projects, and there is a project manager in every project. Mm-hmm. So the head of projects is the one who is the first point of contact with the project manager, who is point of contact with the partner, and they do the interaction. The management in the project is actually minimum from our end. What we have created is the core IP, as I say, is more an environment that is I call bottom-up environment where people are actually learning from each other, sharing not top-down structure, but more of a bottom-up structure, where they are intrinsically motivated to be part of the project. They are solving this problem because they want to learn and build something interesting. You don't need any more top-down structure management. So within the project, the management is most very light and very bottom-up, just creating an environment for people to collaborate and have the right motivations and structure to build those solutions. And then we have a project manager and a head of projects who would kind of coordinate, let's say, from the partners to the collaborators. So that's kind of where we have.
Are those people that also end up? Sorry, you're creating it. Is a university for them too? Is it also a university for project managers? Are they learning to project manage? Or are those people you need to they come up through the? Because it sounds like a lot of this is with these AI data scientists. But I mean, is there a track for project managers or something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Actually, in the website, you'll see we have 4 tracks of development. One is an engineering track where you purely become an engineer writing code. And there is a community lead track where you develop yourself to go and open
exactly.
chapters. Then we have a research track where you're actually working on, for example, we have been working with Sophia Robot to build compassion AI or conscious AI. That's a research stream where they can go and publish articles. And we actually are launching our own journal, actually AI research journal, so they can publish articles. And then we have this project management, kind of more, we call it startup or management kind of project management, which is their route. So we have defined 4 different paths to develop for individual, and they can choose which one they want to do.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like resource management. It's what you call community, but I mean, it's like how you get the people is one piece. How you manage the projects, how you do the engineers, and the third
engineering, and one is research.
Oh, and the research, yes, of course. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very interesting, actually, I think. And what I have to ask, Omdena, where does the name come from?
So. Interestingly, when I started the company, the Omdena name was just a 6-letter which has .com available. So that was no meaning for that. But it was a few months later, I realized that it has a very deep meaning and actually very meaning which is very makes sense for what we are doing. So Omdena, as you can see, there's 2 words. You can OM, Sanskrit word for universe or unification.
Yeah.
And Dena is also a Sanskrit word, also in Hindi, which means to give.
Oh.
So you can actually combine
universal giving.
Yeah, so you can say that it's a place where your goal is to unify the universe, and the goal is to give back to the world.
Nice name. I saw the of course the I was pretty sure the maybe was from the that I thought, but the rest of it I didn't know that. And so this is something you want to do, like for the foreseeable future. Like, well, obviously there's a lot of work. There's still what you just outlined in terms of the World University. There's a lot of work. I guess there's a lot of work to get there. So, but it sounds like something that you're basically fully engaged. And are you alone? Like, I mean, obviously you're working with lots of great people, but like, there's no other. Do you have anybody else? Like, there's no other co-founder or anybody else that you. I don't know.
Omdena has no co-founder. There's a founding team member. There are a couple of founding team members, but there's of course employees, around 22, 23 employees who are full-time core team employees, like head of projects, head of community, kind of employees. And then we have this kind of structure. So this is how the company is. And yeah, this is something I would love to do. I mean, when I thought about my life, what I really, really enjoy, and I thought education is something that I really always enjoyed. Whether it was speaking, I was never speaking because it was not an ego thing or something, because I enjoyed sharing my knowledge. I think education is something I presume see myself doing for the rest of the life, and that's what makes a lot of sense with Omdena also. Like, it's basically a platform to educate, but through solving real world problems.
That really speaks to me. I'm a believer in that.
So a couple of questions. One about how you work with, or in some way collaborate or compete with, existing educational systems that obviously people study this stuff. There's loads of other people interested in teaching and learning this subject. The second thing is whether you think the idea of this platform could work in other areas, whether it's, programming or, engineering, chemical engineering or, protein design. Can you imagine a sort of Omdena of X, which does the same mechanism in a different domain than AI? And how do you view and how are you viewed by educational institutions?
Yeah, so I will answer the first one. We are actually building partnerships with universities. We have started partnership with the University of Ladakh. We're giving degree courses on AI, driven by Omdena. So Omdena is kind of giving the education. So why universities? I don't see them as competitors. Why they want to partner with us? We are partnering with different universities. It's because they realize that there's a lot around theoretical knowledge. Everything is around theory. You go and learn theory, but you need practical real-world experience, specifically in fields like AI and these kind of things. So they want to be part of, or at least collaborate with Omdena, because we can have access to this community, the global community. Also, you learn from each other across the world. So often in university setting, you are sitting in a classroom with people who are similar to you. It may be gender and race may be different, but mostly you have same social background, similar kind of age group. What we see a lot in Omdena, when we run a project, the age group is from 16 till 60. We have project managers who are 50, 60 years old, and you are working in such a diverse environment. You learn a lot from each other. So this is what they also realize the value of Omdena. So I think that's where I see the education in universities actually being a partner. Same with online courses. Actually, one of our partners is deeplearning.ai, and deep learning is really big. They have 500,000 or 1 million followers. They're quite big, and they are a partner of Omdena also because as a community we are much smaller than them. But I think that the value that they see is again this practical driven project experiences. So that's where I see the with other education institutions. In terms of the other part of the question, that whether I see Omdena for X and Y, there is one thing that makes Omdena work specifically in AI is the collaboration part. Now, why does collaboration or this 60-80 people team make sense for AI innovation, let's say? It makes sense because typically when you try to solve a problem using AI and machine learning, you do not know which algorithm would be the best. So you need to try out multiple approaches, perhaps simultaneously, to see which one is the best fit. Now that works. Then what happens is 60 to 80 people creates this multiple task, and each of them kind of trying to solve the problem through different tasks, and they discuss with each other, they share the knowledge, and then they see which is the winner idea, let's say, and then they say, okay, this is the model that works. Now, this is the basic essence of the design. So it would work in environments which has similar structure. For example, software engineering will not work. Because in a software engineering, you're not trying different approaches. You know the path well defined. You often know this is what I have to write a code, I have to create a backend database and things like that. But wherever there's an exploration aspect, so for example, it could potentially work in marketing, growth marketing, or sales, that you need to know what approach might work, what kind of things could work. So I think those kind of environments where there's an innovation aspect, innovation to me is like you try different approaches, don't know, product design might work well. There, I think the Omdena approach would work.
That's interesting. So it's not really dependent. It's actually counterintuitive. I would have thought that a more structured thing, something like software engineering, would work, but it actually doesn't, because, and maybe that's part of the bottom up that you're talking about, because you have this bottom up model, which I find fascinating. I think that's an awesome way, which somehow limit management.
Yes.
So actually it's a savings somehow if you can actually create a bottom up.
We couldn't have built Omdena through top down structure. There is no way.
Yeah, exactly. That's
and obviously, we're recording this just at the beginning of 2023, and obviously in the last few months, the AI and this GPT chatbot is vastly popularized, and I think there are 700 startups trying to build things on top of that technology. And do you sometimes sort of come across ideas or applications of AI where you think, that's so interesting that I'd like to run my own project to do this or that you sort of see problems where you'd like to use AI for some particular goal or project? Just because you're a creative person, you come up with new ideas? Or do you think when that happens, you think, I have to leave that because Omdena is my big thing and I need to focus?
Yeah, one thing that, Richard, this interesting question you ask, and one of the things that I learned in the last 2-3 years is the most important thing in building something really good is focus. I mean, and I was listening to one quote from Steve Jobs, and I really liked what he said. He said, or from not from Steve Jobs, or from someone else who said, Steve Jobs said him that that focus is not about things that you give up because you don't want to do. Focus is things that you don't give up, things that you really want to do, but still don't do it because
exactly
that is more important to do. So that's actually what I've learned building Omdena. There's so many other things I can do, yes. And in fact, even traveling, speaking, I stopped my speaking arrangements a lot. I don't go much anymore. I don't accept hardly speaking once a month, maybe, or once in 2 months, because I want to focus. I really enjoy the kind of, do things that I really enjoy and just keep on doing that. So that I think that focus is the most important thing.
And obviously we're getting towards the end of our allotted time, and I'm still thinking that you're obviously the founder, you're the leader. Is the organization dependent on you, or could you have a heart attack or get hit by a bus tomorrow and it carries on? And do you see this building something that's got longevity going beyond yourself? Are you aiming to sort of work yourself out of the organization, or maybe you've already done that? What's your role in the organization? Could it carry on growing without you?
I think not yet. I think that it will not, but definitely I would love to be a place where it can run by itself. It has the right processes, the management, everything, so that, and I don't need to be there. It has, over the time from the first year to now, my time is much less spent on actually operational things. So I already see that. But not because I don't want to do that because I think, I want to retire. I want to do that because I think organizations should not be so much driven by one person or personality. I think organizations should have its own processes, tools that people can follow and run it. So that's why I want to do that.
Right. So, it's difficult when you're growing rapidly and things are evolving, to automate that and make it all work quietly without it's very, very hard.
There's definitely a period of time where having a leader is way more efficient. It's the most efficient way to get things done and to get things. It's like you will grow faster, I believe, But it's like, but at the same time, I think what you're saying is once you get it set on its way, then having these things. But I don't think can't do that too early. I don't think you can just too early just be like, okay, I'm gonna, I think that there's a huge efficiency for saying, we're gonna do it like this. Let's do it like this, and let's not muck around with anything, and let's do it basically. And you can help drive, as you said, the whatever the priorities are, they're even within the organization. Richard was asking you personally if you see opportunities, but the same thing happens within the business, I assume, itself, right? What should we do? Should we do these 10 things? No, let's do these 3 things that we think, let's do them really well. Basically, I'm not sure but if you agree, but I think there's a role for, for a human and for the leader, basically, at that point.
Maybe as you comment on that, you could describe your own leadership style, because I think that's a really interesting question. I'd love to hear how do you describe your own leadership style while you answer Kimon's question.
That also evolves. At the first year, I was doing a lot of things myself, so talking to people. But I think now, where I'm, yes, I think I don't spend a lot of time on operational thing. I think I spend not much actually, because there's employees, they have responsibilities, and they do that. So I think what I'm trying to do more is creating the right processes to make sure that we all work as a team. I think that's one of the things that is quite important, because otherwise everyone kind of goes in their own direction. So how do you make all of these people work as a team? That they have the same vision, that all together see that together the vision that we see where we are going as a team together. The second thing that I actually did also a month ago, because when we hire people, I again let them figure it out themselves, and they often told that they would like to know what is the culture of the company, and I kind of wrote down the company culture. This actually is in the website. There are 12 points of the company culture that we expect you to learn by himself, or things like that. I wrote it down. What I define as a culture of being in Omdena. So that actually helps also the people to feel that they're part of one team together. So I think that what I am at least now focused a lot is how do I create an environment where everyone feels that we are part of one team, yes, one company, not individual departments trying to optimize individual things.
Very
and
good.
You just touched on culture, which is exactly the mystical thing in between everything. And how do you, because it's great to have 12 points, but how does everybody get unified and believe, that really does take a leader, an individual to do. So, and do you go around, I suspect you spend a lot of time traveling around just getting to meet like the chap, whatever. Do you go to the chapters? How do you? No, not much.
So actually, even the people who work for the core employees of Omdena, they are in 12 countries now, actually from Vietnam, Philippines to the US. So even I have met them only like all together as once. Last year only we met in Turkey. So I think, that's also I'm learning, like how do you create this environment? But what I've seen that the intrinsic and the extrinsic motivation are very important, both combined. So intrinsic is they feel that they're part of something meaningful, something good. They're doing something good in the world and developing. That's one. At the same time, extrinsic, okay, they're getting enough money and they have a career growth and things like that. They can. So keeping that in sync is very important. So as long as we have this in sync, I don't think there's a lot of need to kind of being friends. I mean, actually don't want to be friends with my colleague, with people I work with. I just think, okay, I create this environment for you. You clearly know this is what you get. This is what your benefits are. This is financial, intrinsic, extrinsic. This is where you can grow. And then we all have the same common vision together. That this is where the company is going. And I think that kind of brings them together. This is what I'm trying to do. And that's...
Yeah, I think you have a huge, let's say, competitive advantage or whatever you want to call it. But in the fact that what you're doing, like what you're calling intrinsic, the intrinsic motivation is like basically making the world better. I mean, like a lot of companies say they do that, but they're not. But it's hard to really, and then they pitch it and they show how they're doing. But you're literally, like whatever, if you're sourcing school sites in Southern Sudan, I mean, that's clearly a positive. That's a positive for the world. So I think that has to help a lot for just people sort of feeling part of the team or feeling part of the mission. Basically, they want to be part of the mission. Basically, so that definitely is a good thing.
So one final question connected with leadership and culture, because I think culture can be defined as shared experience. And if you see something that's not aligned, can you give an example of a tough decision you had to take, or where something was definitely not aligned with your vision of what the culture was and what you as the leader did about it? Because I think often the test of an organization is when things are difficult, or when everything's going fine, it's easy. So can you give has there been any example of something difficult where you saw things were wrong in some behavior or activity or direction, and you had to intervene and do something to set things back on track? Because those examples can be very telling. Maybe there isn't one, but if there is, please could you share it?
From Omdena, I think one example that comes to my mind is internal conflict between the people, right? There was this, I remember there was a case where one girl felt offended by something that someone said in the call. And so the cultural difference, people come from different backgrounds, different culture. It also happens in Omdena, like they perceive things differently. Like someone from Pakistan said something, which was for him a casual point, but someone from the US, let's say, got offended. And how do you deal with those kind of things? So this is one of the challenge that I personally faced. And there is, at least luckily we haven't had a lot of those cases. The way I had to do was basically do calls with both of them and try to see those points that's what I would say the closest challenge that I had faced, at least in Omdena, that how do you bridge the cultural gap and kind of people with different backgrounds come together and they can misinterpret each other.
Yeah, I think the point that I'd highlight that for our listeners is that you had to make a call with each of them afterwards. But if you want a good culture, sometimes intervening on something, there may not be the company's on fire, but if you intervene on the little things when they're going off track, then the word gets around that this really matters, because the fact you devoted time to it and you made the calls, the fact that you cared enough to follow up sends a very powerful message. But it's not just the slogan on the website, that you actually took some action and did something about it. So is there anything that we haven't asked that you think is important to our listeners at all, that, something that is really important that you say, well, why haven't you asked me about this or that?
No, I don't think there's anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll one more question, this for me. So yeah, this podcast is for, we hope it inspires people to be entrepreneurs, to want to be entrepreneurs, to understand what it's like. Is there any advice you would give to any, I was going to say young, but there's a lot of ageism, any age person that's thinking to themselves, maybe I want to set something up for myself. Maybe I want to do something. You're a person that is done it a couple times now. Is there any advice or anything you would share for anybody like that?
Well, I mean, this is the same what I think most people say is just, if you have something, just go and do it. Don't be afraid of failures and things like that, which is, I'm sure they have heard many times. So that's all it is. Just go and do it.
You don't have any Eastern slant on it? Maybe something new that we can, I like the Eastern slant, actually, that maybe we shouldn't take some of these things so seriously.
Well, then I will say this way, that I also say this thing, that imagine what you want to do. It could be startup or anything in life. Imagine in 3 years' time, what you are going to do is going to fail, right? It could be relationships, could be startups, could be anything in life. Imagine in 3 years it's going to fail. Then ask yourself, will you still do it for the next 3 years? If the answer is no, then don't do it anyways. But if the answer is yes, then only do it, because do it for the journey, not for the end result.
See, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. I knew you could do it.
Thank you very much.
So really, thanks so much for your time. I found this very interesting. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. And so I wish you the best of luck. I'll be a cheerleader rooting Omdena on it. I've been watching from the sidelines for a while anyway, but yeah, I like what you're doing, and I learned a lot today. So thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Kimon, and thanks, Richard, for getting back to me. And I loved the conversation. It's always nice to have this chat, actually.